Hi, I'm Stacey Johnson, and you're listening to Caretakers Journey Podcast.
I'm your host, Carole Leathem, and I just want to welcome you to another meaningful conversation today. My guest, as you heard, is Stacey Johnson, and I've invited Stacey over the next 4 episodes to help me with a series I'm calling Becoming Whole Again. This series was created for caretakers who are walking through those quiet storms of life. Grief, which you all know, listeners, I'm still working with, change of identity, and that long road to healing. Stacey is a women's empowerment coach, a resilience mentor. We're going to talk about that. And she is the founder of Anchor Resilience. And I'm very anxious for you to hear about that. After experiencing multiple life shifting losses, including the unexpected passing of her husband, Stacey transformed her grief into a powerful mission. And I love this mission. Listen to it: to help overwhelmed, selfless women who are over functioning regulate their nervous systems. Boy, do I need that. And rebuild their lives rooted in clarity, strength, and self trust. Does that sound like something you need? I know I do. When she's not coaching, you can find Stacey outside in nature with her family and dogs. She has also a YouTube channel called Surviving Disruption, or she's walking beside women who are rediscovering joy after loss. Her message is very, very clear, and I cannot wait for you to hear it. The main thing she wants us to know is that we don't have to carry it alone anymore. Now, today in our first episode, I'm calling it Surviving Disruption. As a caretaker, have you ever felt that way? I know I have. Rediscovering joy after loss. And we're going to talk about how to navigate the shattering moments that upend our lives. Maybe it was the loss of a loved one, maybe a major life transition, or at the end of a season you weren't really ready to let go of. We're going to explore how God meets us in the rubble, what healing actually looks like, and how to begin rediscovering joy, not as a quick fix, because you know me, I don't like those quick fixes, but as a deep, sacred unfolding. You're not alone. Take a breath, grab a warm drink, and let's begin the journey towards healing. Welcome to the show, Stacey.
Thank you, Carol. Thanks for having me on this podcast. It's wonderful to be here.
Oh, well, Stacey, you talked about a sudden loss and how it became this gateway to reclaiming joy and anchoring that into this resilience and learning how to receive care, not just give it. And I think that's so critical because for caregivers, so many times we're really good at giving care, but we're terrible. And I'm raising my hand and saying that's me at giving, at receiving it. So, will you share with us what that sudden loss was and how it became the gateway?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, pro
Diving into the deep end. I tend to do that.
That's okay. That's okay. That's what we're here for. It'll be 4 years in November. Well, it started in October of 2021, of getting a frantic phone call from my mom while I was working, and she couldn't get a hold of me, so she called my husband, and he said, "Call your mom. She needs you."
Oh,
And that phone call was to tell me that, my stepfather was not responsive that morning, and she had taken him to the hospital, and told me what hospital to go to, and I went there, and yes, he had been declared, dead.
mm,
Did not wake up in the morning. And 3.5 weeks later, well, a week and a half after he passed, so we get through the services. During that week, my mom had her own health scare. The night that my stepfather had passed away, my brother and I had to admit her into the hospital because she was having the signs of a heart attack, which were what they call that widow heart. So
mhm,
she was just her nervous system had gotten really shook up
mm,
with that shocking, day. And she does have heart issues. So they wanted to monitor her, admit her. She did not suffer a heart attack, but she was in AFib. She did have, and then they wanted to run tests. And so um, we get through his services, and the day of his last part of his service, this gravesite service, my husband that night was like, I don't feel so good. I'm like, oh no, and this is 2021. So COVID was still a predominant illness that people were getting, especially when there was mass numbers.
Mm,
And we had a funeral, and probably, 300 people had gone through the um, funeral home that night or the day, couple days before. And so he went to bed early. We both went to work the next day. This was my first day back to work, but my mom was having a um, heart cath, and my uncle was taking her because he was still in town, took her, and then called me and said, well, they did the heart cath and she needs a stent, so they're keeping her overnight. And I said, okay, I will leave work and relieve you and come to the hospital. And I called my husband on my way and was like, I'm leaving work. And he's like, I'm on my way home too. I feel like a Mack truck hit me. He goes, I feel awful. And I'm like,
mm,
okay. The library at the time, libraries were giving free COVID test. I had to pass the library to get home. I said, I will stop and get some free COVID test. My daughter was a, at the time was working in a nursing home, had administered many COVID tests. And she's like, I'm still at home. I'll give it to him. So you bring home the test. Sure enough, as I was changing into clothes to go to the hospital in, she says, Mom, he's positive. So I still did everything I had to do. I knew I needed to be the caretaker of my mom. So I went to the hospital and just kept myself, because at that time, the rule was if you had been exposed, you weren't supposed to be. So I didn't tell anybody that I was exposed. I just kept my hand sanitizer on me. I kept my mask near me. And we just stayed at the hospital with my mom. And so that week, I was taking care of her. She's grieving. She just has had a procedure. So I'm going back and forth,
mm.
and didn't go back to work because I did let them know that he was positive. So it was supposed to be at least 5 days before I test myself and then can go back to work. So I'm going between her and him. And about a week later, after he got diagnosed, he wasn't getting any better. He was actually getting worse. And, I made the decision to take him to the emergency room, and he got admitted for double COVID pneumonia,
Mm.
and he was put in ICU. So that's when they weren't allowing visitors at the hospital, so had to put him in. They finally let me visit after a couple of days of being in there, and, he was at the hospital a week in a few days, and then he passed away.
Wow. Wow.
So, yes, and, um, so, yes, within 3.5 weeks, I suffered 2
Yeah.
losses.
It's oh, and you're caring in the middle of that, you're caring for both your mom and your husband and, the family and all of the details. Wow.
Right, right,
Wow.
because I have 2 daughters, and so they were in school, and they both got COVID during that time. I don't grace of God, I was the caretaker, how could I get sick? So
Wow. Yeah.
So, grace of God, I did not get sick with COVID during that time. I don't know how I did it besides bleaching, pretty much having my hands in bleach the whole time. I don't know.
Wow. So let's talk for a second about how did you reclaim you talk about I'm just sitting here listening to this and I have this overwhelming it just brings this overwhelming heaviness on me
Mhm.
as I'm listening to you share. How did it become this gateway to and like what did you do next?
So, I went back to work. He passed away the day before Thanksgiving. So, unfortunately, we had obviously, um, 2 big holidays right after. Um, and I worked for a school at the time. I'm a therapist, and I was working for a school as a supervisor, and, I provided mental health supports to, the kids and the staff. And so fortunately, with it being a school, I was backed up to, the winter break. I was very close. So I had made the decision that to get through this grief and to get, like, basically just the logistics, all the legal things, paperwork and housing and all that stuff taken care of, I took off the time until we went back to work January, like, 2nd or whatever, right after the winter break. And so I went back to work, and, uh, naturally, even though I'm a therapist, I have always been the caregiver. I've always been the one that took care of, not, even before my husband was sick or even before my mom was having her, I was always the one that I just took care of everything in our household. I was what I call the CEO, the manager of our household. I took care of everything. And so I continued that.
Mhm.
And I continued that. And it wasn't till it was about a year, 8 months after he passed away, I started doing some extra therapy work
Mm.
and to get some extra money into the household. And so I was still working at the school, but I was still doing therapy. And I started to see a lot of women that were either had been going through a grief
Mm.
themselves, this grief of identity, or, caregiving, doing everything for everybody. And there was
Mm.
this sense of overwhelm that they were feeling. Their nervous systems were dysregulated. And I started seeing myself in them. And recognizing as a therapist, I needed to do more for myself as well to help other women. And then I started to really connect to myself,
Mm.
allowing for that
Yeah.
stillness and listening to more of my feelings, recognizing my feelings. And I started to recognize that I can grieve and feel joy at the same time.
Yes. Yes. Yes, and, that's so important for us to learn because I know from the very beginning, I've been dealing with my husband's mental health struggles for it'll be 10 years in November, and learning that joy and grief, it's like a dance that I feel like we do, and it's like
Mhm.
you're constantly giving and taking, and sometimes you're feeling it at the same time, and one of the things you talk about when you're talking about, anchoring into that resilience is how we can receive care, not just give it. And because as caretakers, we often put everybody's needs first. We push through our pain so that others can feel safe. And if you have kids and you're in this situation, you have your mom and you're trying to take care of everybody else, how can a caretaker, I love this picture. How can a caretaker tell that they're surviving and not actually healing? Because for me, it took about 2 years into the journey before I figured out that I was just barely hanging on like cats, claws on a tree branch, and not healing. So how can we tell? What are some signs?
It's interesting, Carol, because I would have to say it did take me that about that long too, is that I was just surviving. Like,
Mm.
I was doing everything because there is a subtle difference because on the outside, surviving and healing look very similar. For everybody else, it looks like you're doing great. It looks like you're functioning because you are. You're getting through your day. People are saying you're so strong. But for us, we're inside. We are like, yeah, I'm barely hanging on here. So I don't know what you're seeing, but
Yeah.
they're seeing us. It's very normal for caretakers to operate like that. We're checking off the boxes. We keep going forward. We're 10 steps ahead, and so it is that, that's what surviving looks like. But on the healing, on the other hand, it's more like it allows room for us to, um,
Mhm.
support ourselves and not just looking at all the tasks. It allows for us to breathe
Yes.
and
Yes.
feel that breath, like really feel that breath. And that's what healing looks like versus surviving. It's, looking more for us instead of just always doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know for me, I bounce back and forth between survival and healing.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I can be on this journey of healing, 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 and I'm going to therapy and I'm doing everything, getting the massages and doing all of the things that I have to do for self-care, and then I slip back into the to not healing and just surviving, and when I do, it's really funny, one of and my listeners have heard me say this before, I have a couple of friends who, if they see me out of this normal routine that they see me in normally, or like I'm not on social media, I'm not texting, I'm just kinda being quiet. One of them, or both of them have in the past sent me a text and said, "Hey, just checking on you, wanna know when you took a shower the last time." And my listeners have heard me say this before because if they ask me when was the last time I took a shower and I have to stop and think about it, then I realize that I'm slipping back into that survival mode and not in the healing mode. And so for me, sometimes if I'm feeling kind of wonky, I'll just say to myself, "Okay, when did I take a shower the last?" It's like that's kind of become the temperature that I
Yeah.
take to say, "Am I doing okay?" And I know that you talk about joy, but what are some of the subtle joys that we can see or signs that the joy is kind of missing from our caretaker's life?
Yeah. Because joy doesn't always disappear with like this loud noise. It kind of, yeah, just kind of starts to subtly disappear because, again, caretakers, we're so used to just doing. And so we sometimes don't even recognize what joy feels like because we're always doing. But,
Mm,
the subtle signs that when for myself and for the women that I work with, it's that we aren't really looking forward to anything anymore. We're just taking care of everybody else. And we
mhm,
kind of forget like what, looking forward means. We stop dreaming. We stop thinking
mm,
about those bigger visions, those visions of ourselves. Because one, we may not even really remember who we are because of all
mhm.
the labels that we've been given. You know,
Oh,
we
that's
might laugh less.
mhm, yeah,
We feel emotionally just there, kind of numb. You
mm,
know, we're kind of flat. Like we don't really have. We're not sad. We're not angry. We're just kind of there, kind of living
I get
in
that,
it.
yeah. So
Um,
when you I go ahead, sorry, didn't mean to cut you
that's
off.
okay. And sometimes we apologize for taking care of ourselves.
Oh, that's so good. That is so good, and I have a feeling that there are a lot of caretakers who are listening to this right now who are going, "Oh my gosh, that's me. Oh my gosh, that's me." Because 'Cause I'm just coming out of a hard few weeks, and
Uh-huh.
so I resonate with what you're saying, and I'm thinking that there's some caretakers out there that are kind of resonating going, "Oh, I didn't even know that this is what was going on because it's so like you said, it's so subtle. It's
Right.
like it happens so quickly, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're there, and you find yourself in this state. So you also talk about rediscovering joy when you get there. So what is the first steps once we realize we're there? What can a caretaker do
Do
to
to get it
start
back.
to start getting back and believing that joy is possible again?
Right. Well, that's the first step is one, recognizing that joy does exist, even though we may not feel it, is that it is still there. We
Mhm.
just have to allow ourselves to feel it. And it begins with it goes back to giving ourselves permission,
Yeah.
permission to allow ourselves to be okay and to allow that joy,
Mm,
even though we are taking care of other people
yeah.
and allowing ourselves to also there's that guilt, not allowing ourselves to feel guilty that we feel it even though we are taking care of others or and I know for myself I struggled with that guilt feeling for a
Mm,
while of like how can I feel joy when I'm still supposed to be grieving.
I
and
know.
recognizing that grief doesn't mean I need to be crying every day, that I can
Me
still smile and have a good laugh and be grieving.
Yeah. So what would you say to that woman who's kind of walking through that? They're going through that grief because I know I just lost my mom and there's this grief going through there. There's some big major changes coming up in our life, in our my husband's and my lives in the near future. And that's causing huge stress for him because nothing is settled and it's a huge change that none of us saw coming, and I'll be ex now my listeners are going, "What is this? What is this?" I'll explain it in a few other episodes. I'm not ready to go public with it yet, but there's some major changes coming, and so there's this I feel that guilt of, "Okay, I got a call the other day that the marker got placed on my mom's grave, and I have to go up, and I have to take a 5-hour trip up
Mm.
and sign off on it." And I'm like, wow, there's just so much, but then there's this joy and this guilt, and so here again, I'm doing this dance of joy and guilt, and so what would you say to a woman who's walking through that? What advice would you give them?
Well, guilt is so common, and it's a common barrier, and especially for if we've lost someone or we're caretaking for someone, um, that we have that guilt sometimes along with that joy. And
Mhm.
one thing that I work on is that one, joy doesn't betray our love.
Mm.
It honors our humanity, it's part of our emotions. But I do a lot of work with my clients in regards to one, recognizing our feelings, and then allowing ourselves to sit with our emotions for a second, allow us to witness them, really feel them and start to notice. Because the other thing that I teach my clients is that feelings are vibrations, and these
Mm.
vibrations come from our thoughts. So, doing the work around the thought of that guilt, because guilt is from a thought, and usually the thought is an unhelpful thought that kind of lingers there, like,
I
so.
I know I had guilt for the first few weeks after my mom passed away because this huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders.
Mhm.
And it was so hard because I missed her, I missed the daily connection that I had with her, the daily connection I had with my sister, all of the things that were putting so much pressure, but there was this relief because I don't have to get on a plane every 5 or 6 weeks to go to Milwaukee. I don't have to be on the phone ordering things for her from it's like there was this relief, and so that guilt was in there, and one of the things I noticed is that my nerves were like, you talk about tingling, you talk about on edge. I was just like this nervous person. And you talk a little bit about the role of our nervous system
Mhm.
in the regulation
Yeah,
of rebuilding that joy. So
right.
what does our nervous system how do we regulate it and how does that play into rebuilding that joy after our griefs?
Yeah. Our nervous system is an essential role, um, because if we're dysregulated, then our nervous system can't receive joy because it believes that it's a threat.
Mm,
You were used to being, like in that, and people think like, because our nervous system responds with the fight, flight, fawn response. And so
yes.
people think that, you know, if we're in that fight mode, then we might be angry, but it's not always that. It's that once you're one step ahead, always, and so we're always doing, and fawn is that people pleasing kind of reactions. And so our nervous system, is used to regulate, like being there when we're in that caretaking mode, because we're
Mhm.
always like, and we're always waiting for like that next shoe to drop.
Yes.
And
Oh,
so,
God.
you know,
That's so true.
and it is. And so, and then when, if we're trying to, if we do not do the work to regulate our nervous system, then joy doesn't feel safe because it's a stranger. And so,
So
we have to do the nervous system work along. That's what I teach is nervous system work plus changing the thoughts that have keep us in that nervous system,
mhm.
our nervous system escalated. So I do both so that when our body starts to feel safe and regulated, then we can experience joy because it's
I
no
love
longer a stranger.
I love that, I love that. So, let's just talk for a second as we kinda close out our first episode here. I'm so excited, number 1, that you're gonna be back for 3 more. I cannot wait as we dive into the rest of these conversations because this one, I can already tell is gonna resonate so deeply with the community that I minister to. So let's talk for a second. What is one small daily practice? If there was one thing we could do, like we could implement today, as a caretaker, what's one small daily practice I can implement today as a caretaker that will help me start to reconnect with myself? Because I do see where there are times where I almost like set myself aside. It's almost like I put myself in the closet, close the door, and say, I'll deal with you later. I've got to deal with
Mhm.
it. So, what's
Mhm.
one small practice that we can do to reconnect with ourselves?
Yeah. So I do a lot of somatic techniques that help us regulate our nervous system and helps us like our brain know that we're feeling safe. And so I always start with a 3 to 4 minute. I call it my rooting ritual, and it starts with a somatic breath. So gently pausing, just getting even before our feet touch the ground, even in the morning is just getting connected with your breath. So I always, I do a close my eyes type of thing, or even if I just sit up in bed, allow my feet to touch the ground. But before I start the moving forward, I just gently, I put a hand on my heart and I put a hand on my belly and connect myself to that breath. So
Oh, I love that.
breathing deeply in, and I breathe in. And as I breathe in a feeling that I want to feel. So if it's joy or if it's peace or just calmness. And then when I breathe out, I release, stress or the anxiety, whatever feeling you might be feeling. So again, it releases any uncomfortable feelings that might be stuck and then opens us up to receiving that feeling that we want. And then I do a lot more work in regards to connecting to myself and listening to my intuition versus all the thought that can be the noise.
Yeah. Yeah, I know for me, a lot of times I have to stop in a situation in the middle of the day when I start to feel myself just spinning, or that pressure coming back and my nerves. I can tell. I've gotten to the point where
Mhm.
I'm really good at telling, "Oh, wait, I'll feel this," and I'll go, "Okay, wait, I'm not coping." That's basically what I say. I'm not coping. And so what I've started asking myself is, "Okay, what is true?" Is
Right.
what my mind telling me what is true or and I always when I go into the fall, I always struggle with this because my husband's last major crash 10 years ago happened in the fall,
Mm.
and so there is my
Yep.
body knows
Yep.
that this is what happened, and
Right.
I still deal with the trauma because it was so traumatic.
Yep.
I still deal with that trauma, and so I have to stop myself and say, "Okay, what is true?" And then I'll go, what my thoughts are right now are not true. This is what's true. And it's almost like exchanging. And in the scripture, it talks about taking captive every thought. And it's amazing what our thoughts can do and
Right.
get us
Yes. Yes.
get us
Our
so messed
thoughts
up.
are huge to what we're feeling, and then our reactions are based on what we're feeling usually. And so I do a lot of work in regards to regulating our nervous system and the thoughts.
Mm,
Um, a big phrase that I always ask is, what is the problem I'm facing right now? Because so many times we're like, what if, what if, what if? And
mhm.
and asking ourselves, what is the problem I'm facing right now?
Wow. That's so good. Well, listeners, I hope that you will take advantage of this free little tip that Stacey has given us. I know I'm going to because I know that there's a couple of things when I wake up in the morning that I feel before I even start the day. And so,
And that
go
grooming
ahead.
ritual can be done anytime. Like when you said you can feel it in the middle of the day sometimes, just taking a moment to connect to your breath is
Just
can
the
be
act of just the act there's something that happens when you just like right now, I'm putting the listeners can't see this, but I'm putting my hand in those 2 places, and there is some sort of a grounding that I can feel happening in my body just
Mhm.
even as I'm doing that, so wow. So, as we close out today, how can the listeners connect with you and find you?
Yes, I'm on social media, I'm on Facebook, and, I have the on the YouTube, I do have my, surviving disruption, it's Stacey Johnson Coaching as well, and anybody can email me at any time, and that's Stacey at staceyjohnsoncoaching.com.
That's awesome, and I will go all from in the show notes as well, so you can just go down to the show notes and land it. And I am so grateful, Stacey, for you joining me today. I cannot wait for next week. Our meaningful conversation next week, as a little teaser for you, is called Mourning Who You Were, How to Release Your Old Self and Reclaim Who You're Becoming. And wow, I have seen myself walking through some changes in my life in the last few months after losing my mom because she was such a huge part of my daily routine. And as we close out our show today, I am so thankful for you listeners, each of you that join me every week. And there are now 33 countries. There are people in 33 countries who are listening to us. And I love that this format allows us as caretakers to connect to each other. And I know that the caretaker's journey can be messy and chaotic. And and we know Stacy and I both have been through it. You've heard her story, you know my story. And some of you are anticipating or navigating this loss of a loved one. And I feel for you because like me, we're grieving, we're walking through, we're trying to figure out what's next, we're trying to figure out how to deal with everything. And I'm thankful for our community and how we can encourage and support each other. And if you know a caretaker, please share this show with them. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so because that just that one act of hitting subscribe help other caretakers find us. And I will put a link in the show notes for the Caretakers Journey newsletter that I put out every week. Every Tuesday morning, it drops into your inbox. And it's full of inspiration, practical tips, and things that I'm finding helpful on my journey of caretaking because while my mom I no longer care for her, I am still caring for my husband. And next week, I'll be back for another meaningful conversation about what it looks like to be on the caretaker's journey. And until then, it's all about him.